Hi, I'm Steffany Strange. Want to hear something scary? Myra was looking forward to her trip to Ireland. It had been several years since she had last seen her grandmother, Kathleen. It was also her grandmother's pleasure to see her granddaughter and to give her a family heirloom, a beautiful gold cross necklace. Her grandmother promised it would bring her good luck and, more importantly, protect her. Although not typically superstitious, Myra was deeply moved by her grandmother's gift. After lunch, Fiona, an old childhood friend of Myra's, invited her to have dinner in town. Her grandmother told her that she could go as long as she wore her new necklace. As Myra was finishing up her makeup, Fiona pulled into the driveway and honked her horn. Myra was in such a rush, she completely forgot the necklace, which lay on the dresser. At the restaurant, Myra and Fiona were laughing and having a good time when an old man stumbled into the restaurant screaming, "It was him! I saw him!" The old man was frightened, his eyes wide and bloodshot. He was panting and his face was white as if he had seen a ghost. "He called my name!" the man cried. "My name! I'm a dead man walking!" There was this frightened look on Myra's face, and Fiona told Myra not to listen to crazy old Tom, but still, Myra felt as if she wasn't being told everything. Midnight came, and Myra was anxious to get home, but Fiona wasn't ready to leave. Myra decided that walking home would be good for her, so she headed down the old dirt road through the woods. She knew the path well, but it felt much different in the dark. There was a deadly silence among the trees, whose shadows stretched out like twisted, thin hands above her. Suddenly, a sound pierced the silence. It sounded like horse hooves. She heard it again. It was coming from right behind her. She turned, and there in the shadows stood a large black horse. Mounted on top was the tall figure of a mysterious rider holding something. It was too dark for Myra to make out. The horse just stood there, not moving an inch. She came under attack as it reared up and galloped toward her. Myra ran for her life so hard that her lungs were on fire. She could hear the horse snorting, its thunderous hooves pounding the earth beneath its powerful legs. Myra tripped over her own feet, falling to the ground. She curled up in a ball, preparing to be trampled to death. But the horse walked straight past her. As it did, she clearly heard her name. The rider called in a deep, hollow voice. Myra looked up, but they had disappeared, and all was quiet once again. Finally arriving at her grandmother's house, Myra's cell phone buzzed. Her eyes went wide. The text was from Fiona. Old Tom had been found dead outside of his house, apparently from natural causes. What a strange and terrible night. Opening the door with shivering hands, she immediately woke her grandmother, telling her everything. And a glimmer of fear filled Kathleen's eyes as she was told about the mysterious rider. "Did he see you? Did he call your name?" she asked in a shaking voice. "Yes, how did you know that?" Myra thought. Kathleen's entire body tensed as she faced Myra and said, "That's impossible. How could he call your name? You were wearing your..." Kathleen's words stuck in her throat as she looked at Myra's bare neck. The chain was still on the dresser. Kathleen's voice trembled. "The rider you saw tonight was the Dullahan, an ancient Irish fairy who carries his head in his hands. He's a harbinger of death. He rides at night searching for victims. If he passes you and calls your name, you're called to death." Initially, Myra wasn't sure she could believe what she was hearing, but then she remembered something and she felt her blood run cold. It was the flashback of Tom mentioning someone had called his name. Kathleen started sobbing. "Gold repels the Dullahan. He won't go near anyone wearing it." "I'll go put it on right now," Myra cried, But before she could leave the room, something pounded the door. She and her grandmother clutched onto each other as it blew wide open. Standing in the opening was something more demon than man. He had a muscular frame with a long, tattered cloak rippling in the breeze all around him. His broad shoulders did not support his head. Rather, it was clutched in his right hand. Deathly pale, its eyes were hollow. Sunken orbs of pure black, rows of needle-sharp teeth poking through thin, bloodless lips. The Dark Nightmare rose his arm, holding the head out so the eyes were facing them. With a voice like gravel, it said,
"Myra, I've come for you."
The screams of Myra echoed through Kathleen's head as she stood helpless and powerless to protect her loved one. Myra's name had been called and she had failed to wear the protective heirloom. Now, all Kathleen could do was watch. The next morning, Fiona and her grandmother came to visit Myra and Kathleen. They found the door wide open. Myra's corpse lay sprawled out on the floor. A traumatized Kathleen sat near, clutching her knees to her chest, rocking back and forth. "It was a Dullahan! It was a Dullahan!" Along with old Tom, a teenage boy, an elderly woman, and a young man, Myra's body was taken to the corner. If outsiders were to look at the corpses of the unfortunate souls, they would think that they had simply died of natural causes. However, the locals knew better. They knew it all too well. The Dullahan would be back, and he would be looking for more unlucky souls to reap.
On the first warm spring day after a long, brutal winter, Siobhan asked her friend Aaron if he would like to join her on her visit to the legendary Blarney Castle. On their drive to the castle, Siobhan couldn't contain her excitement to see the Blarney Stone in person.
"Remind me again what the stone does?"
asked Aaron. Siobhan explained that the legend says that anyone who kisses the stone will receive the gift of Gab, basically eternal charm. You'll be able to sweet-talk your way out of anything. Aaron chuckled a little confused. Siobhan seemed really excited for what basically sounded like they were headed to some kind of tourist trap, although he thought that would be an amazing thing to have if it was true. Siobhan went on to explain how the stone got its magical powers. The builder of the castle, Cormac Ladder McCarthy, needed help getting out of a sticky situation, so he called upon the goddess Cleona to help him. She told him to kiss the first large boulder that he saw. With her blessing, he did it and was able to charm his way out of any problem. After that, he set the stone into the parapet of Blarney Castle. Finally, they had reached their destination. They walked across a long, narrow rope bridge to access the giant castle. But instead of following the printed signs to the popular Blarney Stone, Siobhan ducked into a roped-off area and stealthily headed off in the opposite direction. Aaron, wary but very curious, followed her lead. Finally, in a different part of the castle, Siobhan stopped. In front of them, set within the castle parapet, was a very large and noticeably darker boulder jutting from the wall. There was an opening about 2 feet in front of it. It hung over the side of the castle from the roof, and the fall looked to be hundreds of feet. Standing there, both Aaron and Siobhan could feel a type of energy emanating off of the angular rock. Aaron's eyes widened with fear.
"How did you know about this?"
Eyes gleaming, Siobhan explained. "During the winter, I did a lot of digging to find out where the real Blarney Stone was. The other stone is just for show, for tourists, but the legend is real. Quick, grab my ankles, hold me steady." She lay down on her back with her head hanging over the opening. Aaron gripped tightly as she scooted her body forward until her upper body dangled above the ground far below. Angling her hands against the wall for support, grunting, she hefted herself forwards and upwards, finally brushing the stone with a kiss. Aaron hurriedly dragged her back in and on his hands and knees looked down. down at the ground far, far below. Extreme panic set in. He'd never been this high before. His vision started to blacken along the edges, blurry and nauseous as he felt himself tipping forward toward the edge. Aaron, pay attention to me, Siobhan asserted and compelled Aaron. Immediately, he snapped out of it, angling to look at Siobhan with razor focus. You're all right, and he suddenly was. Back away from the edge, and he did. Aaron stood there amazed at Siobhan as she slowly grinned with self-satisfaction and turned to leave. Eyeing the boulder, Aaron made a sudden decision.
If kissing the stone did that, taking part of it with us would be even better.
Making sure Siobhan was not looking, he reached out, quickly yanking a looser piece from the stone, put it in his pocket, and jogged after her to catch up. As they both rushed along their way out of the castle, Siobhan far in the lead, objects started falling over randomly around Aaron. A painting, a tapestry. Then there was the crash of a suit of armor. As he ran, he heard a voice repeating louder and louder.
Return the stone! Return the stone!
At the castle entrance, Siobhan had stopped, waiting for Aaron. Stepping on the bridge, he grabbed her to urge her to run, trying to get off the grounds to outrun the voice now thundering between his ears. Several feet out, the bridge started to slowly unravel. Siobhan screamed as the bridge gave, loosening below them and snapping in two. Their screams echoed as they fell. Something yanked hard on his foot, and Aaron found himself hung upside down, leg hooked on a part of the bridge, dangling above a terrified Siobhan. She gripped part of the fallen bridge, legs dangling. The stone then tumbled out of Aaron's pocket, hitting Siobhan in the face, causing her to loosen her grip. Aaron grabbed her as she steadied herself back on the piece of wood. Stunned, Siobhan blinked. Was that a piece of the stone? Aaron nodded. You unleashed the curse of the Blarney stone. It is never to be removed. Then the wood Siobhan was holding snapped. Wide-eyed, Aaron watched as she fell into the water below, being dragged by some force far, far below its surface. Aaron screamed out for her. His mourning would be brief, as a piece of wood that his foot was caught on snapped, and he plummeted down, head first, never to be seen again. As soon as his body disappeared into the water, the stone magically emerged out of the water and floated back up to the wall. No bodies were found. The bridge was repaired. An unfortunate accident, officials said. Savvy locals knew better, though. 'Twas the curse of the Blarney Stone, claiming more victims.
Grace and Nora had plans to go to the Giant's Causeway. Just north of their hometown of Bushmills in Northern Ireland, it's a massive collection of hexagonal stone pillars formed by a lava flow millions of years ago. Legend has it that the giant of Ireland known as Finn McCool defended his country from the Scottish giant Benandonner among the massive pillars. The siblings figured it was the perfect place to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. When they arrived at the site, all was peaceful. They wandered the grassy cliffs and enjoyed the view. Admittedly, it was a bit more boring than they expected, until suddenly, the earth began to rumble and brought them to their knees. There was a loud, echoing sound as the ground beneath them continued to shake. The earth beneath Nora tore away as she fell into a widening fissure. She grabbed the edge of the cliff as she dropped, and Grace grasped desperately at her, trying to pull her back up. But the ground quaked again. Nora lost her grip and dropped into the dark abyss. Grace heard a loud, guttural sound coming from the water's edge. It couldn't possibly belong to a human, she thought. And then, a wilder scream replied to the roar. Suddenly, she saw a massive figure rise up on the beach below the cliff. It resembled a human, but was as tall as her 2-story house. Grace stifled her own scream as a second monstrous figure, bigger than the first, rose out of the water and approached the other. She could not believe her eyes. The giants of the Giant's Causeway were real. Finn McCool versus Benandonner and their legendary conflicts. Grace had heard the stories, but she had never believed them. She had to get out of there and find help for her sister without the giants seeing her. Just then, the two monsters collided with the force of an earthquake, causing Grace to lose her balance and tumble down the hill to the beach below. Benadonna turned and looked hungrily at Grace and moved quickly towards her. Finn McCool charged after his foe. Grace screamed as the two giants bore down on her. Just as Benadonna was about to snatch up Grace, Finn McCool jumped between them. The giants clashed again, roaring and screaming. Benadonna kept trying to grab Grace as she ran, but Finn McCool kept knocking him backwards. Finally, Finn McCool ripped one of the thousands of basalt stone columns from the ground and bashed it over Benadonna's head, causing the giant to fall into the water, creating a massive wave that rolled up to the cliffs towards Grace. Before she washed out to sea, Finn McCool grabbed her. "Please don't eat me, please," Grace pleaded. She screamed as the giant swiftly brought her close to his face. But when she opened her eyes, she found the giant just staring back at her. Grace then remembered that Finn McCool was a giant of Ireland and swore to always protect his people just as he had protected Grace. Lowering her and opening his massive palm, he loosened his grip on her. Grace heard Nora calling out from somewhere below them. She was alive. Grace trembled as she pointed to the crevice that had swallowed Nora whole. Finn jumped into the fissure and disappeared. A long time passed, and Grace thought both him and her sister were now lost forever. The earth exploded in front of her, dirt cascading around her as Finn broke his way through. He set the now unconscious Nora down gently beside Grace. She worriedly shook her sister until she opened her eyes. Grace turned to show her the giant who had saved them, but Finn McCool was gone. He had retreated back into the earth, where he would remain until the next time Ireland was threatened by enemies or monsters.
Thanks so much for listening. Like and share if this video gave you the chills. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell for notifications. See you next time.